The wedding should have ended with applause. Instead, it ended with the sound of terrified silence. Charlotte Hayes stood beneath the towering stained glass windows of St. Augustine Cathedral, her fingers trembling around a bouquet of white peonies. Sunlight streamed through the colored glass, scattering crimson and sapphire reflections across the polished marble floor. The church smelled of fresh lilies and burning candles, exactly as she had planned it. She had planned everything. As New York City's most sought-after wedding planner, Charlotte had spent months designing every detail of her own ceremony, every flower arrangement, every ribbon tied around the pews, every violin note drifting through the sanctuary had passed through her careful hands. For the first time in years, she wasn't organizing someone else's happily ever after. She was finally living her own. Across from her stood Ethan Brooks, successful investment banker. Perfect smile, perfect tuxedo, perfect fiancé, or so she believed. The priest smiled warmly. If anyone here knows any reason these two should not be joined in holy matrimony. Nobody moved. Charlotte smiled through nervous tears. This was it, the beginning of forever. Then every phone inside the church vibrated at the exact same moment. A strange ripple spread through the guests. Heads turned toward the massive oak doors. Outside, engines growled. Not one, not two. En entier convoi. Black SUVs rolled into the cathedral courtyard with military precision, surrounding the church from every direction. The violinists stopped playing. The priest froze. The groomsmen exchanged nervous glances. Charlotte frowned. What is happening? Nobody answered. The church doors opened. Heavy footsteps echoed across the marble. 1, 2, 3. Then, dozens. Men dressed in perfectly tailored black suits entered first. Each carried concealed weapons beneath their jackets. Each moved with disciplined precision. No one spoke. No one needed to. The air itself seemed to retreat before them. Then he walked in, tall, broad shoulders, black tailored suit worth more than most cars. Dark hair swept neatly back. A silver watch gleamed beneath his cuff. His expression carried no anger, no urgency, only absolute certainty. His cold gray eyes scanned the room once. Everyone instinctively lowered their gaze. Even people who had never seen him before somehow understood one thing. This man wasn't powerful. Power belonged to him. Someone whispered near the back pew, "Oh my God, it's him." Another guest nearly dropped her phone. Luca Moretti. The name spread through the cathedral like a prayer spoken in fear. The most feared mafia boss in New York. The ghost every politician denied knowing. The man no witness had ever successfully testified against. The man whose enemies disappeared without leaving bodies. Charlotte had only heard stories. Stories whispered in restaurants after midnight. Stories exchanged between detectives over drinks. Stories that sounded too terrifying to be true. She had never imagined those stories would walk into her wedding. Luca ignored everyone. His polished shoes echoed softly against the marble as he walked directly down the aisle. Toward her, toward the bride. Gasps erupted around the church. Ethan stepped forward. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Luca never even looked at him. His attention remained entirely on Charlotte. When he finally stopped, only inches separated them. Charlotte looked up for one impossible second. The terrifying mafia boss simply stared into her eyes, not with desire, Not with hatred, with recognition, as though he had spent years searching for a face he had almost forgotten. Something inside, his normally unreadable expression, shifted. A flicker, gone before anyone else noticed. He leaned closer, close enough for only her to hear. His voice was calm, almost gentle. If you marry him, pause. You'll die tonight. 6 words. Nothing more. Charlotte's heartbeat stopped. What? Luca stepped back. His expression became stone again. Ethan shoved past the priest. Get away from my fiancé. Several of Luca's bodyguards moved instantly. Luca lifted one finger. They stopped. He still hadn't touched Charlotte. He still hadn't threatened anyone. He simply looked at Ethan for the first time. You have 30 seconds. Ethan laughed. You think you can walk into my wedding and 29. His voice never rose, never changed. 28. The church grew colder. Charlotte looked between the two men. Ethan, call the police. Several guests already had. None of the calls connected. Cell service had disappeared. Completely. Luca continued. 25. Charlotte Stahl. Who was this man? Why was he acting like he already knew how tonight would end? More importantly, why wasn't he trying to stop the wedding? He was giving Ethan time. Time for what? Ethan suddenly grabbed Charlotte's wrist. We're finishing this ceremony. His grip hurt. Charlotte blinked. Ethan had never squeezed her this hard before. Never. She tried pulling away. Ethan, don't listen to him. His smile had vanished. Sweat appeared across his forehead. His breathing became shallow. He wasn't angry. He was terrified. Luca noticed it too. Interesting. Charlotte frowned. What? Luca's eyes never left Ethan. I've spent 15 years watching men lie. His voice echoed through the silent cathedral. They all make the same mistake. Charlotte looked at Ethan again. What mistake? Luca answered before Ethan could. They become afraid. A bead of sweat rolled down Ethan's temple. Charlotte had never seen him like this. Not once. Not during business failures. Not after losing millions during market crashes. Not even when his father died. Yet one look at Luca Moretti had reduced him to panic. Why? What do you know? Charlotte whispered. Before Luca could answer, the first gunshot shattered the stained glass window. Crash. Colored glass exploded across the sanctuary. Guests screamed. Another shot. Then another. The cathedral instantly dissolved into chaos. Children cried. People dove beneath pews. The priest fell to the floor. 3 masked gunmen burst through the side entrance, carrying assault rifles. Take the bride. Charlotte froze. Take the bride? Everything happened at once. Luca moved faster than thought. He grabbed Charlotte by the waist. The first bullet struck the marble exactly where she'd been standing, a heartbeat earlier. Fragments exploded around them. What are you doing? She screamed. Keeping you alive. Another volley of bullets tore through the altar. Luca turned his body, shielding Charlotte completely with his own. His bodyguards drew weapons. Silenced gunfire erupted throughout the cathedral. Professional, precisi. No wasted movement. One attacker fell. Another disappeared behind a pillar. The third threw a smoke grenade. White smoke swallowed the church. Charlotte couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't think. Strong arms lifted her completely off the ground. What? Hold on. It was Luca. He carried her effortlessly through the smoke. Bullets ricocheted behind them. One struck the stone wall inches from his head. He never slowed. Outside, rain had begun falling. Black SUVs waited, with engines running. More armed men secured the perimeter. Luca, one of his captains, shouted. Second team approaching. Luca placed Charlotte behind the armored door of the nearest SUV. I'm not going anywhere with you. You are. You kidnapped me. No. He closed the distance between them. I prevented your murder. Charlotte stared at him. Rain soaked both of them within seconds. You expect me to believe that? I don't care what you believe. His voice remained calm, despite the gunfire echoing from inside the cathedral. I care whether you're breathing tomorrow. Another explosion erupted behind them. The cathedral doors burst open. Guests flooded into the courtyard, screaming. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Charlotte searched desperately for Ethan. I have to find my fiancé. Luca's expression hardened. No, he could be hurt. No. She shoved against his chest. You don't understand. His eyes darkened. I understand far more than you do. What does that mean? Instead of answering, he looked toward the cathedral entrance. Two men dragged a wounded attacker into the rain. The masked gunman laughed, despite bleeding heavily. You were too late. He coughed. They already sold her. Charlotte frowned. Sold. Who? The dying man's blood-covered smile widened. The bride. Every sound around her disappeared. The rain, the sirens, the shouting, everything faded beneath those two words. Sold. Hea. She looked slowly toward Ethan. He had just emerged from the church, untouched. Not a scratch, not a tear in his tuxedo, not even dust on his shoulders. While everyone else had been running for their lives, he stood perfectly still, watching her, watching Luca. Then, without warning, he turned around and ran. Not toward Charlotte, not toward safety, toward a black sedan waiting across the street. Luca didn't even bother looking surprised. I was hoping he'd make that mistake, Charlotte whispered. Ethan. The sedan accelerated away. One of Luca's men reached for his weapon. Boss? Luca raised a hand. Don't. You'll lose him. I know. Charlotte stared at him. You let him escape? Luca finally looked into her eyes again. Cold. Steady. Certain. No. He glanced toward the disappearing sedan. I let him lead us to the people who paid for you. Charlotte felt the ground disappear beneath her. What are you talking about? Luca stepped closer, rain dripping from his dark hair. 12 years ago. His voice softened for the first time. I failed to save one little girl. Charlotte frowned. I don't understand. You don't remember me. A long silence settled between them. But I've never forgotten you. He opened the SUV door. Get in, Charlotte. She didn't move. His next words changed everything. Because the little girl I've spent 12 years searching for. His gray eyes never left hers. Was the bride standing at that altar today? Rain hammered against the armored SUV as it sped through Manhattan. The cathedral disappeared behind them, swallowed by flashing police lights and a sea of chaos. Inside the vehicle, silence was suffocating. Charlotte sat pressed against the leather seat, still wearing her wedding gown. Layers of white satin were stained with rainwater and tiny flecks of shattered stained glass. Her bouquet had been left behind, somewhere inside the church. Across from her sat Luca Moretti. Perfect posture, hands resting calmly on a black cane that concealed a custom Italian blade. Not a wrinkle in his tailored suit, despite the gunfight. His gray eyes remained fixed on the city passing outside the bulletproof windows, as if weddings interrupted by assassins were merely another Tuesday. Charlotte couldn't take it anymore. "Who are you?" Luca answered without looking at her. "You already know my name. I know what people say about you." "And what do they say?" "That you're a murderer." A faint smile touched one corner of his mouth. "They're not wrong." The honesty unsettled her more than denial would have. "You walked into my wedding." "Yes." "You threatened my fiancé." "Yes." "You kidnapped me." "No." His answer came so quickly it almost sounded rehearsed. "I extracted you." Charlotte laughed bitterly. "Is that what mafia bosses call kidnapping?" "It's what professionals call removing a target from an active kill zone." She stared at him. "You expect me to believe that?" "I expect nothing." His gaze finally shifted toward her. "I've learned expectations get people killed." The SUV turned sharply beneath an overpass. Charlotte reached for the door handle. Locked. She tried another. Nothing. She looked toward the heavily armed men sitting in front. None of them acknowledged her. No one spoke. No one even looked in the rearview mirror. It was as though Luca's silence had become law. Finally, what did that man mean? Luca remained quiet. "The one outside the church." She swallowed. He said, "I'd been sold." The mafia boss closed his eyes for a brief second. He told the truth. Charlotte felt anger replacing fear. "No." She shook her head. "Ethan loves me." He proposed after 6 months. "So? You met by coincidence?" "Yes." "He knew exactly what flowers you liked before your third date." Charlotte blinked. "How do you know that?" "He convinced you to leave your apartment in Brooklyn. He insisted you move into his penthouse. He isolated you from 2 college friends because he claimed they were jealous." Charlotte's breathing slowed. "He said they were toxic." "They questioned him. He said they didn't support our relationship. They noticed things you didn't." Charlotte's stomach tightened. Every sentence landed like another crack spreading across glass. "Stop. He encouraged you to quit accepting weddings outside Manhattan." "Stop. He gained access to every financial account you owned." "Stop." Her voice echoed inside the SUV. Luca remained infuriatingly calm. "I've watched Ethan Brooks for 21 months." Charlotte stale. "What?" "I know where he drinks." Silence. "I know which hotel rooms he rents." Silence. "I know every offshore account under his control." Silence. "I know every woman he's met." Charlotte whispered, "You're lying." "I wish I were." She looked away. No, this couldn't be real. Ethan had been thoughtful, patient, gentle. He surprised her with breakfast every Sunday, remembered every anniversary, held her hand whenever she felt anxious. He couldn't, could he? Luca reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He removed a thick envelope. He placed it gently on the seat beside her. "Read." Charlotte didn't move. "I'm not interested in your games. They aren't mine." After several seconds, she slowly opened the envelope. Photographs, dozens. Ethan entering warehouses in Brooklyn, meeting unfamiliar men, exchanging briefcases. Another photo. Ethan embracing a blonde woman outside a luxury hotel. A third. Ethan, sitting beside someone whose face had been blurred. The date beneath each image stretched back nearly 2 years. Her hands trembled. No. She flipped through faster. Receipts, Banktransfers, shipping manifests, phone records. Then, a single photograph made her stop breathing. It showed Ethan standing inside an abandoned warehouse. Beside him, 6 frightened young women. Their wrists were tied. One was crying. Charlotte looked up. No. Luca's voice was almost emotionless. The warehouse was emptied before federal agents arrived. She stared at the picture. They disappeared. Charlotte felt sick. Ethan isn't. He isn't the mastermind. What is he? A recruiter. The word hit harder than any slap. He identifies women. Charlotte shook her head. No. He builds trust. No. He encourages marriage. No. He delivers them. Charlotte slammed the folder shut. I said no. Tears blurred her vision. This is fake. It was gathered by 4 governments. She covered her ears. I don't care. It was verified by Interpol. I don't care. It was confirmed by my own investigation. I don't. Her voice broke. She couldn't finish. The SUV fell silent again. Only rain filled the empty space between them. After several long minutes, Charlotte whispered, "Why?" Luca answered immediately, "Because you're valuable." She laughed through tears. "I'm a wedding planner." No. He looked directly at her. "You're Charlotte Hayes. Except that isn't the name you were born with." Everything inside her froze. What? You were 6 years old. I don't remember being 6. I know. My parents died in a fire. They didn't. Charlotte stared at him. They were murdered. Her entire body went numb. No. You survived. No. You were placed into emergency foster care. No. You disappeared before anyone realized who you were. She couldn't breathe. My parents were witnesses. The words echoed inside her mind. Witnesses. Witnesses? To what? Luca continued quietly. 3 criminal organizations. The Bratva, the Calabrian Syndicate, and a trafficking network known only as the Circle. Charlotte had never heard the name before. Luca had. Too many times. They murdered everyone connected to the investigation. My parents included. She felt the world tilt beneath her. My father sold cars. He worked undercover. My mother taught music. She decoded financial records. Charlotte's lips parted. Everything she'd believed, every memory, every story told by foster families, none of it fit anymore. You lied. They lied. Luca corrected her. They wanted you invisible. Charlotte looked toward the rain-covered window. I don't understand. You weren't supposed to survive. Silence. You were the only witness nobody found. Another silence. They've spent 12 years searching. Charlotte slowly turned back. So have you. He nodded once. Yes. Why? His jaw tightened. For the first time, real emotion appeared. Regret. I made a promise. She waited. 12 years ago. His voice dropped lower. I arrived 3 minutes too late. Charlotte frowned. What happened? Luca looked past her, as if seeing another night entirely. There was a warehouse. It was burning. I found 17 children. Charlotte felt chills. 16 survived. A Pause. The 17th disappeared. His eyes returned to hers. A little girl. Charlotte swallowed. May? He nodded. I searched every foster home, every orphanage, every state database, every illegal adoption ring. Nothing. You vanished, Charlotte whispered. You've been looking for me for 12 years. Yes. Why would a mafia boss care about saving one little girl? Luca didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his wallet. From behind several black cards, he removed something worn with age. A tiny, silver butterfly pendant. Charlotte Stahl. The breath caught in her throat. She instinctively touched her own neck. Nothing. She hadn't worn a necklace in years. Luca held the pendant in his palm. You dropped this. Charlotte frowned. I've never seen it. You carried it everywhere. I don't remember. You called it your lucky butterfly. A strange pain bloomed behind her eyes. A flash. Fire. Smoke. Someone holding her hand. A silver butterfly swinging in front of her face. Then, nothing. The memory disappeared. Charlotte pressed trembling fingers against her temple. What? Another flash. A man's voice. Run, Charlie. Then darkness. She gasped. Luca leaned forward immediately. What did you remember? She couldn't explain it. It was only a shadow, a feeling, a voice she'd forgotten. Before she could speak again, the SUV suddenly swerved violently. Tires screeched. One of the bodyguards shouted, "Boss!" The driver slammed the brakes. A truck had jackknifed across the road. Too perfect, too deliberate. Luca's eyes instantly sharpened. It's an ambush. The first rocket slammed into the lead SUV. A deafening explosion lit the rain-soaked highway. Flames erupted into the night. Charlotte screamed. Automatic gunfire exploded from both sides of the overpass. Bullets struck the armored vehicle like hail. Glass spiderwebbed, but didn't break. The convoy had driven straight into a trap. Luca calmly opened a hidden compartment beneath his seat. Inside rested a matte black pistol. He checked the magazine in one fluid motion. Another compartment opened. This one contained a compact rifle. He handed it to the bodyguard beside him. His voice never rose. Protect her. The man nodded instantly. With my life. Luca reached for the door. Charlotte grabbed his sleeve before she realized what she was doing. Don't. He looked down at her hand, then into her frightened eyes. For the first time since the cathedral, the terrifying mafia boss looked almost human. If I stay in this vehicle, he said quietly, they'll burn you alive. He gently removed her fingers from his sleeve. Not rough, not impassioned, almost careful. Then he opened the door. Cold rain rushed inside. Gunfire roared through the darkness. Luca stepped into the storm alone. The door slammed shut behind him. Charlotte watched through the cracked bulletproof glass as the man every city feared walked directly into a battlefield. Not running, not hiding, walking as though death itself had been taught to wait for him, and for reasons she still couldn't explain. For the first time that day, she wasn't afraid of the mafia boss. She was terrified for him. The night erupted into war. Rain poured across the highway, turning the asphalt into a mirror of flashing muzzle fire and burning wreckage. One of the lead SUVs was engulfed in flames, thick black smoke twisting into the stormy sky. Charlotte couldn't breathe. She watched through the cracked bulletproof window as Luca Moretti stepped into the gunfire with the unnerving calm of a man who had accepted death years ago. Bullets ripped through the rain. None of them slowed him. Two attackers emerged from behind an overturned truck. They never had the chance to raise their rifles. 3 muted shots echoed through the storm. Both men collapsed before they hit the pavement. Luca didn't hesitate. He kept walking. Every movement was economical, every shot deliberate. No wasted motion, no unnecessary violence, just brutal efficiency. Inside the SUV, Charlotte wrapped both arms around herself. She had seen action movies. She had watched crime dramas. None of them looked like this. This wasn't heroism. It wasn't rage. It was experience. The terrifying realization settled over her. This man had survived countless nights exactly like this. Boss. 12 o'clock. One of Luca's soldiers shouted through his radio. A black van burst through the smoke. Its side door slid open. Masked gunmen unleashed a barrage of automatic fire. Luca dove behind the smoking engine block of a wrecked SUV. Metal screamed as bullets chewed through the vehicle. Take the bride alive. The command echoed over the gunfire. Charlotte's blood froze. Alive. Not dead. Alive. They weren't trying to kill her. They were trying to capture her. Luca had been telling the truth. Inside the SUV, one of the bodyguards pressed a finger to his earpiece. North perimeter breached. Another voice crackled through. 2 snipers on the bridge. The guard beside Charlotte calmly loaded another magazine. Mom. She looked at him. If this door opens, he handed her a compact pistol. Shoot anyone who isn't wearing our crest. Charlotte stared at the weapon. I've never fired a gun. I hope tonight isn't your first. Before she could answer, boom. Another explosion rocked the convoy. The SUV shifted sideways several feet. Charlotte cried out as her shoulder slammed into the door. Outside, the battle had grown even worse. Luca spotted the sniper first. A tiny flash reflected off the scope high above the overpass. Without looking, he drew a second pistol from beneath his jacket. 1 shot, 8 stories upward. The sniper disappeared. His body rolled over the guardrail. Charlotte watched in disbelief. How could anyone shoot like that? Another attacker charged toward the SUV, carrying an explosive vest. Luca didn't even blink. He fired twice. The man collapsed before reaching the convoy. The explosion detonated harmlessly 30 yards away. Fire washed across the highway. For a brief second, Luca stood outlined against the flames. Rain pouring over his shoulders. Gun in one hand, blood running down the side of his face. He looked less like a man and more like something born from war itself. Charlotte couldn't look away. Then everything changed. A black motorcycle burst through the chaos. Its rider ignored the firefight completely. Straight toward Charlotte's SUV. Boss. Luca turned. Too late. The rider hurled a magnetic device onto the driver's door. Click. Charlotte frowned. What was? Luca's expression changed for the first time. Real alarm. Out. He sprinted. The bodyguard beside Charlotte ripped open the opposite door. Move. What is happening? Now, Charlotte stumbled into the rain. She had barely taken 3 steps. The SUV exploded. The blast threw everyone off their feet. Heat slammed into her back. Her wedding dress caught against twisted metal. She lost her balance. The world spun. She was falling. Strong arms caught her before she struck the pavement. Luca. He pulled her against his chest as burning debris rained around them. A steel fragment slammed into his shoulder. He didn't even react. Another piece sliced across his forearm. Still, he refused to let go. Charlotte looked up. His jaw tightened. Blood soaked through his black suit. You're hurt. It isn't important. It is. He looked down at her. For one heartbeat, everything else disappeared. The rain, the explosions, the screaming. Only the two of them remained. Luca reached up. His gloved fingers brushed a shard of glass from her hair. So are you. His voice was almost gentle. Charlotte realized something terrifying. He hadn't checked his own wounds. His first instinct had been making sure she wasn't injured. Why? Boss. A convoy commander ran toward them. We have to move. Luca finally released Charlotte. Fallback route. Already compromised. Safe house 2. Burned. 3. Surveillance confirmed. Every option was disappearing. Someone knew every movement they made. Someone inside Luca's organization was feeding information to the enemy. Luca understood it instantly. We have a leak. The commander's face darkened. You think it's internal? I know it is. Charlotte looked between them. What does that mean? It means Luca's gray eyes swept across his own men. I don't know which of my soldiers I can trust. Silence. Even the bodyguards exchanged uneasy glances. The Mafia Boss had just admitted the impossible. Someone close to him had betrayed him. A helicopter appeared overhead. Charlotte looked up hopefully. The police? Luca grabbed her arm. No. The aircraft descended lower. No police markings. Matte black. The side door slid open. A man wearing night vision goggles leaned out with a mounted machine gun. Oh, my God, Charlotte whispered. The helicopter opened fire. Concrete exploded around them. Vehicles erupted into flames. Luca dragged Charlotte behind the wreckage of an armored SUV. Bullets ripped through the rain only inches away. This isn't possible. Charlotte's voice shook violently. Who are these people? Luca answered without taking his eyes off the helicopter. The Circle. The trafficking organization? One branch. One branch? There are 9. Charlotte felt physically ill. You mean you're looking at one division of an international criminal empire? The helicopter banked for another pass. One of Luca's men shouted, "They're forcing us toward the bridge." Luca looked ahead. The bridge ended at the East River. Behind them, dozens of attackers. Ahead, water. It wasn't an ambush anymore. It was an execution. Unless Luca made a decision, the kind only he would make. He turned toward Charlotte. Can you swim? What? Answer me. Yes. Good. Before she understood why, he wrapped one arm firmly around her waist. What are you doing? We're leaving. There isn't anywhere to go. There is. Charlotte followed his gaze. The river. No. She shook her head immediately. No, absolutely not. The water is 40 feet below. Correct. We'll die. No, you're insane. Frequently, the helicopter roared closer. Its gunner prepared another burst. Luca looked into her frightened eyes. I need you to trust me. Charlotte laughed in disbelief. Trust you? You don't have another choice. She looked behind them. The attackers were closing in, then back toward the river. Dark, violent, endless. She whispered, I can't. Luca stepped closer. Rain streamed down both of their faces. His voice became quieter than she'd ever heard it. Charlotte. It was the first time he'd spoken her name with anything resembling emotion. I have spent 12 years trying to find you. His hand tightened around hers. I'm not losing you 5 hours after I finally did. For a moment, she believed him. Not because of the words, because of his eyes. There was no manipulation, no calculation, only absolute determination. Then, the helicopter fired again. Without another second of hesitation, Luca lifted her into his arms. What are you? He jumped. Together. Off the bridge. Charlotte screamed. The city lights spun above them. Rain whipped across her face. The river rushed upward with terrifying speed. She buried her face against Luca's chest. His heartbeat was impossibly steady. Even now, even falling toward what should have been certain death, he wasn't afraid. The river swallowed them whole. The freezing impact stole every breath from Charlotte's lungs. Darkness, cold, violent currents pulled them downward. She struggled instinctively. Panic consumed her. Then, strong hands found hers beneath the water. Luca. He pulled her upward through the darkness. Seconds later, they burst through the surface together. Charlotte gasped desperately for air. The helicopter circled overhead, searching, but the storm had become their ally. Heavy rain obscured the river. Smoke from the burning convoy drifted across the water. For the first time that night, the hunters had lost sight of their prey. Luca guided Charlotte silently toward the shadow beneath an abandoned shipping pier. Hidden by darkness, hidden by the storm, hidden from everyone. Charlotte clung to the rotting wooden supports, shivering uncontrollably. Luca climbed beside her. His shoulder was bleeding heavily now. Blood mixed with river water and disappeared into the current. Charlotte stared at him. You've been shot. It's superficial. It doesn't look superficial. It can wait. No. She reached for him instinctively. He froze. Neither of them moved. Her trembling fingers rested against his injured shoulder. His breathing slowed. No woman had touched him like this in years. Not with fear. Not with compassion. Charlotte carefully tore a strip from the bottom of her ruined wedding dress. Luca watched silently. She wrapped the fabric around his wound with surprisingly steady hands. You should have let me fall. His expression hardened. I was never going to do that. You could have died. So could you. That's different. No. His answer came immediately. It isn't. Charlotte looked into his eyes. For the first time, she no longer saw the infamous Mafia Boss. She saw a lonely man carrying the weight of promises made long ago, a man who had crossed a battlefield, thrown himself into explosions, and leaped off a bridge just to keep one woman alive. Somewhere deep inside her, the fear she had felt toward Luca Moretti began to change into something far more dangerous. Trust. The storm concealed them for nearly an hour. By the time Luca and Charlotte reached shore, the rain had softened into a cold mist that drifted over the deserted industrial docks of Brooklyn. Charlotte could barely feel her hands. Her soaked wedding dress clung to her skin like ice. Every step sent pain through her bare feet. Luca walked several feet ahead, pistol drawn, scanning every rooftop, every warehouse window, every dark alley between abandoned shipping containers. Even after surviving an ambush, he never relaxed. Not for a second. Can you keep walking? Charlotte nodded. I think so. She immediately stumbled. Without a word, Luca caught her elbow before she hit the ground. Neither of them spoke. For several long seconds, they simply stood there, close enough for Charlotte to hear his breathing, close enough for Luca to notice how violently she was shivering. He slowly removed his expensive cashmere overcoat. "It's freezing. So are you. I'll manage." Before she could protest, he draped the heavy coat over her shoulders. It still carried his scent. Cedar, leather, a faint trace of expensive cologne. Strangely comforting. Charlotte looked at him. "What about you?" "I've spent winters in Siberia." She frowned. "What?" He kept walking. It wasn't voluntary. She wasn't sure if he was joking. Something told her he wasn't. 20 minutes later, they reached what appeared to be an abandoned printing factory. Broken windows, rusted gates, graffiti covering old brick walls. Charlotte looked around. "This is your safe house?" "No." Luca walked toward a cracked concrete wall. He pressed his palm against one loose brick. A hidden steel door silently slid open. "Chalut style." "What?" "The real entrance." They stepped inside. The steel door disappeared behind them. Darkness gave way to warm light. Charlotte stopped walking. The underground bunker looked nothing like the decaying factory above. Italian marble floors, modern security systems, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a fireplace already burning, original oil paintings, a gran piano. Everything felt elegant, quiet, almost peaceful. It didn't resemble a criminal hideout. It resembled a billionaire's private residence. Luca noticed her expression. "I built this after my father was assassinated." Charlotte turned. "You live underground?" "I survive underground." There was a difference. Within minutes, several members of Luca's inner security team arrived through separate entrances. None of them wore suits now. Only tactical gear, weapons, body armor. Every face looked grim. A tall woman with auburn hair entered first. "Luca." She stopped the moment she noticed Charlotte. "So this is her." Luca nodded once. "Charlotte?" He turned slightly. "This is Isabella Romano, my chief of security." Isabella extended a hand. Charlotte hesitated before shaking it. The woman's grip was firm. Her eyes, however, never stopped studying Charlotte. Not with jealousy, with curiosity. "So," Isabella finally said, "the ghost actually existed." Charlotte looked between them. "What does that mean?" Luca answered, "You've been a rumor for years." Another man entered, carrying several tablets. "Boss." His voice was urgent. "We intercepted encrypted traffic." He placed a satellite image onto the large conference table. Charlotte stepped closer. Dozens of blinking red markers covered Manhattan. "What am I looking at?" Luca's face darkened. "They're searching. For me? For us." The technician zoomed in. Every airport, every bridge, every harbor. They've deployed nearly 300 operatives. Charlotte felt dizzy. 300? Luca quietly added. "And those are only the ones we've identified." She stared at the map. I'm just a wedding planner." "No." Luca's eyes met hers. "You're the missing witness." Charlotte sank into the nearest chair. Nothing made sense anymore. The life she'd known that morning already felt like it belonged to someone else. Her apartment, her clients, her wedding, Ethan. It all seemed impossibly far away. She whispered, "If everything you've told me is true." Luca waited. Why didn't they kill me years ago? Silence settled across the room. Then Luca slowly opened a locked drawer. Inside lay dozens of old case files, yellowed newspaper clippings, photographs, handwritten notes. Every file carried one name, Charlotte. She looked up in disbelief. You kept all of these? For 12 years. He spread several photographs across the table. Some showed orphanages, others showed foster homes, school records, hospital admissions. Every few months, another photograph, another false lead, another little girl who wasn't her. Charlotte felt tears sting her eyes. You really searched this long? Luca didn't answer. He didn't need to. The evidence surrounded them. A younger guard hurried into the room. Boss. He looked uneasy. We found something. What? The church security footage. The technician connected a hard drive. Video appeared on the massive screen. Charlotte watched herself walking down the aisle. Guests smiling. Flowers. Music. Everything looked normal. Until the footage switched to a hidden camera inside the bridal suite. Charlotte frowned. I didn't know there was a camera there. There wasn't. Luca answered quietly. They installed one. The video showed Ethan entering the room 45 minutes before the ceremony. He checked his watch, then removed Charlotte's phone from her purse. He replaced it with another. An identical phone. Charlotte covered her mouth. Oh my God. The footage continued. Ethan opened a hidden compartment inside Charlotte's makeup case. He placed a tiny tracking device beneath the lining. Then, he smiled. Not the warm smile she knew. Something colder, calculated, predatory. Charlotte looked away. I can't. She couldn't finish. Luca turned off the screen. Enough. Several minutes passed in silence. Finally, Charlotte spoke. You said there were 3 criminal empires. Yes. The Circle, the Bratva, the Calabrian Syndicate. And they're all after me? They're after what you know. I don't know anything. You don't remember anything. Charlotte looked at him. There's a difference. He nodded. There is. Then Isabella interrupted. Luca. Everyone turned toward her. We have another problem. She projected another image. A photograph. Charlotte's heart stopped. It showed her younger sister, Emily, 24 years old, smiling outside her apartment. Charlotte stood instantly. Emily. Another photograph appeared. Emily leaving work. Earlier that evening, a black SUV parked across the street. Someone watching her. Charlotte's voice shook. They found her. Luca immediately turned to his commander. How long ago? 37 minutes. Dumb meat. Charlotte grabbed Luca's arm. We have to save her. We will. They'll kill her. They won't. How can you know that? Because. Luca's expression darkened. She's bait. Charlotte style. They know you'll come. No. Charlotte shook her head violently. I'm going. No. You can't stop me. I can. She glared at him. You don't own me. No. His voice remained calm. But I refuse to bury you. I'm not asking permission. She turned toward the exit. 2 bodyguards immediately blocked the hallway. Charlotte looked back at Luca. You told them? I did. You had no right. I had every right. You barely know me. The room fell silent. Luca slowly walked toward her, until only inches separated them. I know. His voice became dangerously quiet. That every person who gets close to you ends up dead. Charlotte's expression faltered. I won't allow your sister to become another grave, she whispered. Then help me save her. Those words struck him harder than any bullet, because she hadn't said, leave me alone. She hadn't said, I don't trust you. She had said, help me. Luca looked toward Isabella. Prepare the rescue team. Isabella nodded. We leave in 20 minutes. Charlotte exhaled in relief. Then, an alarm suddenly echoed through the bunker. Red emergency lights illuminated every hallway. The technician shouted, security breach. Everyone reached for weapons. What happened? Luca demanded. The technician looked horrified. Someone opened Vault 7 remotely. Impossible. It requires your biometric authorization. Luca's face went completely still. Only 5 people possessed access to Vault 7. One of them was standing inside this room. The technician swallowed hard. We've been betrayed. Every weapon in the room shifted instantly. Not toward the exits, toward each other. No one knew who the traitor was. Luca slowly scanned every face. Isabella, his commanders, his intelligence officers, men and women who had followed him for years. One of them had just betrayed everything. Charlotte suddenly noticed something. One guard, standing near the back, sweating, his hand drifting slowly toward the inside of his jacket. She whispered, Luca. He didn't look at her. What? The man behind you. Time slowed. The guard pulled a concealed pistol. Too late. He fired. Charlotte screamed. Luca turned at the last possible second. The bullet tore through his side instead of his heart. Before anyone else reacted, Charlotte shoved Luca out of the bullet's path. Another shot exploded. Glass shattered. Chaos consumed the bunker. The traitor sprinted toward the emergency exit. Isabella fired twice. Missed. Luca, bleeding heavily, drew his pistol with impossible speed. One shot. The fleeing guard collapsed face first onto the marble floor. Silence. Only the sound of Charlotte's breathing remained. She turned toward Luca. Blood spread rapidly across his white shirt. Her face drained of color. Luca. He remained standing. Barely. She reached him, just as his knees finally gave out. Without thinking, Charlotte caught him before he hit the floor. His weight settled against her. The room erupted with shouted orders. Medic. Seal every exit. Find out what was stolen. None of it reached Charlotte. She only looked at the man in her arms. The feared Mafia Boss. The man who had saved her life 3 times in one day. His blood stained the front of her ruined wedding dress. He looked up at her through half-closed eyes. Despite everything, he managed the faintest smile. I told you, he whispered hoarsely. You shouldn't wear white around me. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. Don't you dare joke. His smile faded. Then, for the first time in 12 years, Luca Moretti allowed himself to lose consciousness, and as Charlotte held him tightly, terrified he might die in her arms, she realized something she had been too afraid to admit. The thought of losing him hurt far more than losing the man she had almost married. The bunker fell into absolute silence the moment Luca collapsed. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The most feared mafia boss in New York, the man whose enemies believed was incapable of bleeding, lay unconscious in Charlotte's arms. Then the room exploded into motion. Medical team. Seal every entrance. Nobody leaves. Find out what was taken from Vault 7. Charlotte barely heard any of it. Her wedding dress, once pristine white, was now soaked with Luca's blood. She pressed both hands against the wound in his side. Stay with me. Her voice cracked. Luca, stay with me. His breathing was shallow. His skin had already begun losing color. Within seconds, 2 medics rushed in. We need to move him. Charlotte refused to let go. He's losing too much blood. One medic looked directly at her. If you keep holding him, he'll die. Those words finally reached her. Slowly, she released him. The medical team disappeared through reinforced steel doors. Charlotte remained standing alone in the middle of the command room, covered in his blood. 2 hours later, the bunker felt strangely empty. No one spoke above a whisper. Every member of Luca's organization moved with quiet precision. The betrayal had shaken everyone. If someone from Luca's inner circle had sold them out, no one knew who to trust anymore. Charlotte sat outside the medical suite, still wearing the ruined wedding dress beneath Luca's oversized coat. She hadn't changed. She hadn't slept. She hadn't stopped staring at the closed operating room doors. Isabella approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. You should drink. Charlotte accepted it without looking up. Will he survive? Isabella was silent for several seconds. Finally, he always does. That isn't an answer. No, it isn't. Charlotte lowered her eyes. I thought monsters weren't supposed to save people. Isabella gave a faint smile. They usually don't. Charlotte looked toward the operating room again. So why did he? Isabella leaned against the wall. I've worked for Luca for 11 years. He rescued me from a human trafficking auction in Romania. Charlotte looked at her. I was 19. I thought he was another buyer. He killed every man in that room. Charlotte remained silent. He never touched me. He never asked for loyalty. He simply gave me a passport, a house, a choice. Charlotte frowned. You stayed. I chose to. Another pause. Do you know how many women in this organization owe him their lives? Charlotte slowly shook her head. Neither do we. The operating room door finally opened. The chief surgeon removed his gloves. The bullet missed every vital organ. Charlotte stood immediately. Can I see him? He'll wake up in a few hours. She didn't wait for permission. Luca looked different, lying in a hospital bed. Smaller somehow. Human. Without the expensive suit. Without the weapons. Without the icy expression. He looked exhausted. The years he carried finally visible. Charlotte quietly pulled a chair beside him. For several minutes, she simply watched him breathe. Then, her eyes drifted toward the bedside table. A leather notebook rested there, half open. She hesitated. Then curiosity won. Inside were dates, plus names. Every page documented another search. Boston, Chicago, Seattle, Denver, Miami. Thousands of miles, hundreds of dead ends. Every entry ended the same way. Not her. Keep looking. Page after page. Year after year. Until, finally, one photograph slipped free. Charlotte picked it up. It was taken outside a flower shop. She froze. It was her, 3 years ago, laughing with an elderly customer. She turned another page. Another photograph. She was feeding pigeons in Central Park. Another. Buying coffee. Another. carrying wedding decorations. None of the photographs were invasive, none taken inside her home, always from a respectful distance, always making sure she was safe. At the bottom of one page, Luca had written a single sentence. She smiles now. Good. Leave her in peace unless they find her first. Charlotte's eyes filled with tears. He had found her years ago. He could have approached her. Instead, he watched over her from a distance, waiting, protecting, without asking for anything. A quiet voice broke the silence. You weren't supposed to read that. Charlotte looked up. Luca was awake. His voice was weak, but unmistakably his. She quickly closed the notebook. I'm sorry. You found the photographs. She nodded. You knew where I was. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Luca looked toward the ceiling. Because you were happy. Charlotte whispered, I almost married a trafficker. You believed you were happy. Silence settled between them. Finally, she asked, why me? His answer came without hesitation. Because I failed you once. You were a child. So were you. Charlotte reached into her pocket. The silver butterfly pendant. She held it out. You kept this. For 12 years. She placed it gently into his hand. I think. She smiled through tears. It belongs to both of us now. For the first time since she'd met him. Luca smiled. A real smile. Small. Almost shy. It transformed his entire face. Charlotte suddenly understood why people followed him. Not because they feared him. Because somewhere beneath the darkness, he carried an impossible loyalty. The peaceful moment lasted less than 30 seconds. Isabella rushed into the room. We found what was stolen. Luca's expression hardened immediately. The files? She nodded. Vault 7 contained the original witness archive. Charlotte frowned. What does that mean? Luca slowly sat up, despite the pain. It means they now know exactly who murdered your parents. Charlotte blinked. I thought you already knew. We suspected. Now we have proof. And so do they. Isabella placed a file on the bed. Inside were photographs. 3 faces. Charlotte recognized one instantly. Ethan Brooks. The second, a Russian crime lord. The third, an older man with silver hair. Immaculate suit. Kind smile. Charlotte's blood ran cold. No. Luca looked at her. You know him, she whispered. Senator Richard Lawson, the man who had attended charity galas, appeared on television every week, spoke endlessly about protecting children. Charlotte looked at Luca. The trafficking network, he nodded, was never run by criminals alone. It was protected by politicians, judges, businessmen. The circle doesn't survive because it's powerful. It survives because respectable people hide it. Charlotte finally understood. This had never been about revenge. It had always been about exposure. 3 days later, federal agents stormed 23 properties across 4 states. Secret accounts were seized. Shipping routes were shut down. More than 100 victims were rescued. Senator Lawson was arrested while attempting to board a private jet. Ethan Brooks disappeared for 48 hours. He was finally captured trying to cross into Canada using a false passport. When questioned, he confessed everything: the weddings, the disappearances, the buyers, the circle. Within weeks, the criminal empire that had hunted Charlotte for 12 years began to collapse. Not because one mafia boss started a war, but because one little girl had survived long enough to become the witness they could never erase. 6 months later, autumn returned to New York. Charlotte stood inside the same cathedral where her life had changed forever. The shattered stained glass windows had been restored. Fresh white lilies lined the aisle once more. This time, she wasn't wearing a wedding dress. She was helping decorate the church for another young couple. A little girl approached her. "Miss Charlotte?" She smiled. "Yes? Do you think weddings are lucky?" Charlotte looked toward the sunlight spilling through the stained glass. For a long moment, she thought about that terrible day. Then she smiled softly. "I think love sometimes arrives in the most unexpected way." The little girl grinned before running back to her parents. Outside the cathedral, a familiar black SUV waited quietly beneath golden autumn leaves. Luca leaned against the vehicle, dressed in another perfectly tailored black suit. No bodyguards stood beside him today. For once, he had come alone. Charlotte stepped outside. "You've been waiting long?" He glanced at his watch. 23 minutes. "You could have called. I preferred waiting." She laughed. "You hate waiting." "I do. But some things," his gray eyes met hers, "are worth it." Charlotte walked closer until only a few inches separated them. "No gunfire today? I specifically requested a peaceful afternoon." "No explosions? I postponed them." She laughed again. The sound made him smile, something he still wasn't used to doing. She reached for his hand. He looked down, then intertwined his fingers with hers naturally. No hesitation, no fear, just quiet certainty. "Where are we going?" Luca opened the passenger door. "I bought a small house." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "You? It has a garden." "You don't even like gardening." "I've been informed gardens are peaceful." "Who informed you?" "You did." "I don't remember saying that." "You said it while recovering from pneumonia." "I had a fever." "I still wrote it down." She shook her head, laughing. "You're impossible." "So I've been told." Before she climbed into the SUV, Charlotte stopped. She looked back once at the cathedral, at the place where one life had ended and another had begun. Then she turned toward the man who had once terrified her, the man who had searched 12 years without asking for recognition, the man who had crossed battlefields, endured betrayal, and nearly died to keep a promise made to a frightened little girl. She stepped closer, rose onto her toes, and kissed him, not because he had saved her, not because he had protected her, but because somewhere between fear and trust, between danger and devotion, she had fallen in love with the only man who had never stopped choosing her life over his own. Luca rested his forehead against hers. "You know," he murmured. "What?" "The first time I saw you again, I was afraid." Charlotte smiled. "You?" "I wasn't afraid of dying." His thumb brushed gently across her cheek. "I was afraid you'd look at me and only see a monster." Charlotte shook her head. "I don't." "What do you see?" She looked into the gray eyes that no longer felt cold. "I see the man who refused to let a little girl disappear twice." The autumn breeze carried golden leaves across the cathedral steps. Luca opened the SUV door. "This time," he said quietly, "let me take you home." Charlotte smiled. "This time," she answered, "I'm coming because I choose to." The black SUV pulled away beneath the fading afternoon sun, not toward another war, not toward another safe house, but toward a future neither of them had ever believed they deserved. And for the first time in 12 years, neither of them was running anymore.